What's going on YouTube? It's Teach back again with another video, and today we're handing out more off-season grades talking about the AFC East. That means we're talking about the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, New England Patriots, and New York Jets. Let me hear your thoughts on these four teams and their off-seasons down below in the comment section as we go throughout today's video. What would you grade their free agency, their trades, their NFL draft? Love to hear all your thoughts. This is just a catalyst for a conversation. These takes are my takes. Let me hear yours down below. But if you guys enjoy, be sure to hit that like button. It helps me and the channel out a ton. And if you're new right here, like what you saw today, want to see more football content like this, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. You guys understand the concept of this. We're going to go team by team, and let's go ahead and start with the Buffalo Bills, coming off a 13-3 season, won the AFC East, and a free agency that I think, warrants this A- because, not a whole lot of flashy moves. And yes, they had some losses in there, like moving, or having Tremaine Edmonds, move on, not the team moving on, but Edmonds moves on and goes to Chicago. But I think there was a lot of shrewd moves in there, right? Like a Connor, McGovern, bringing him in, signing or re-signing, I should say, Jordan Poyer. That's my favorite move, just because him and Micah Hyde have been such a huge part of this team's identity, so it's great to keep those guys around. And Poyer coming back for not that much money, which was a little surprising to me, but also the extension to Matt Milano. I think there's a lot of shrewd moves in there where they're just keeping the roster intact, freeing up some cap space, moving money around, and then also paying their dues where they have to on some of these guys, and essentially maintaining one of the best rosters in football, except for the loss of Tremaine Edmonds. So yeah, Poyer, my probably favorite signing of the bunch, but a lot of it was re-signings. Matt Milano, probably my honorable mention here. NFL draft, I'll go with a B. Like the move for Dalton Kincaid, and that very nearly was my selection for best pick, just because the way I see it was like this team needs one more difference maker, one more pass catcher to help take some pressure off the shoulders of Stephon Diggs. And right before the Bills got on the clock and traded up to get Dalton Kincaid, we had 4 consecutive wide receivers come off the board. So the wide receiver class was at that point kind of, diminished, I should say, of first round options. At least people I think should have gone in the first round. And then you had one tight end off the board, and maybe Dalton Kincaid could be the other one. Or actually, I think Kincaid ended up being the first tight end off the board. So apologies there. All the wide receivers are gone. Essentially, you were left looking at tight ends. So I think Kincaid is a little bit more than maybe a tight end. You can play him in the slot, play him in line, great after the catch. They just needed one more receiving weapon. With the run on wide receivers, the Bills saw, hey, like these pass catchers are starting to come off the board. We need to add one more guy like that. Let's go get Dalton Kincaid. But my best pick, I think, is going to be O'Cyrus Torrence, because if they stuck and picked at 27, I would have been fine with this selection in the first round. But ultimately, they get him in the second, and then the value is just off the charts good, in my opinion. God, I thought that should have gone in the first round. I get he's not the most fluid of movers, but was Roger Saffold? No, I don't think so. I know O'Cyrus Torrence is a better mover and blocker on the move to that point than Roger Saffold was. So plug and play upgrade there, just on the other side of the offensive line. You bring in Connor Williams to play guard. I think I said McGovern earlier. So Connor Williams to play guard, and then you have another year Mitch Morse. Feels like that interior offensive line is now in a pretty solid spot, at least can be an average unit there. So love the addition of O'Cyrus Torrence. All in all, I'll give this class a B. Also like the Dorian Williams pick in the third round. Feels like a guy who has that uber coverage ability and great athleticism to potentially recoup some of what you lost there from that part of Tremaine Edmonds' game. Then the offseason grade overall, I'll go B+. You just added depth across the board, right? Like and some of it's also maintaining your own pieces, right? But they add a couple of interior offensive linemen. They added a Damian Harris to the backfield. Add a Deontay Hardy for an over-the-top speed weapon, right? They just picked and choose, add a couple specialists, add some depth here, find a couple of guys who, if we have to start them, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And I just love that type of roster building. That's really been Brandon Beane's kind of MO. Just solidify the roster, make sure there's no glaring weaknesses, add superstars where we can, and we're going to have a really good roster. I think the Bills are going to have one of the best rosters going into next year because of the depth they've added around the superstar they have in place. Biggest question mark, this was a little tough because you could say linebacker, with losing Tremaine Edmonds. I think corner specifically is going to take a step forward this year. Year 2, Kyrie Elam, Tre'Davious White coming another year off the injury, right? Like I think he's only going to get better. So I decided to take right tackle. Spencer Brown, it's tough because a lot of times offensive linemen take that year 3 jump. And this is about to be year 3 for Spencer Brown. So maybe this is the year he takes that leap. But at this point, he has not played up to being a starting NFL tackle. And they're going to need him to be, right? Because I think Deion Dawkins is a solid player, and I've already touched on how I think they've patched up that interior offensive line to at least be an okay unit. If Spencer Brown can take a step forward and become, again, at least an average player, this is going to be a good enough offensive line to keep Josh Allen clean, make a good run game, and all in all, have this offense go as it is capable of going and being one of the best units in football. So Spencer Brown right now is that one potential weak link. If they have issues across that offensive line, I will look towards Spencer Brown because I think that's the area where it could come from. But he's also capable of taking another step forward and giving us a plus level or at least average level offensive line in Buffalo. All right, next up, Miami Dolphins, 9-8 last year, second in the division, and I mean that's with Tua Tagovailoa missing a ton of time. Free agency, I'll go with David Long Jr. at linebacker. I think that was my favorite signing. But all in all, I think this was a solid free agency, right? Like Isaiah Wynn was probably an honorable mention here. Wait late in the process, get him as a potential starting left guard option, which right tackle, left guard were the last two spots I felt like this team really could use an upgrade at. And I think Isaiah Wynn fills that. He's also, I think, a good fit at guard for this blocking scheme. And then I'm not accounting for the Jalen Ramsey trade. Again, I do trades separate than free agency. Signings and trades to me are different things, so that's why we're going to come back to that in a little bit. But all in all, I'll say it to be, David Long Jr., 2 years, $11 million for an uber athletic linebacker who can coverage, has a ton of coverage upside. Pairing him up with Jerome Baker, that's a super athletic tandem there in the middle of your defense. So I love that move. Moving on to the NFL draft, they only had 4 picks. So I felt like the best I could do here was B-, C+. But that being said, those first 2 picks to me were home runs. Cam Smith to a Vic Fangio cover 4 heavy defense, and he's playing in a secondary. They already had maybe the best ball skills of any defense in the NFL, right? Like Javon Holland, Xavier Howard, Jalen Ramsey, and now you're adding Cam Smith, who I think his best trait was his ball skills coming out of South Carolina. Are you kidding me? Like, that's a match made in heaven. You get him in a good spot there at 51 in the middle of the second round. And I think we got to see him a little bit more in the nickel last year at South Carolina. He's probably best suited to play on the outside, which means I hope that Jalen Ramsey ends up being that nickel corner, him and Kader Kuho. But I think you now have the opportunity and the flexibility to play mismatch, right? Like if a guy's number one or a team's number one wide receiver is playing on the outside and you feel like Jalen Ramsey's the guy to take that assignment, you play him on the outside. Or if you feel like, hey, we need to slow down CeeDee Lamb in the slot, okay, well, play Jalen Ramsey in the slot. Like you have that flexibility. Or you could just truly play Ramsey inside and have Xavier Howard on the outside taking over that number one perimeter wide receiver responsibility. But this team's going to be playing a lot of quarters and cover 4, so maybe these guys are just playing lanes. I can see that. But again, you have that flexibility. I'm kind of thinking Jalen Ramsey's going to play closer to the actual box, right? Like I think he's going to play nickel corner because he's a good tackler, is solid in the run game, can blitz with him as well, read screens at a high level as well. So I think he's probably best suited for that. Cam Smith can play on the outside. And again, drafting a starting good fit for your defense outside corner at pick 51. There's a few and far between. And then, of course, honorable mention, Devon Achane. Adding more speed to that backfield and to that offense overall. Got to make note of it here. So C+ overall for the draft. Home runs with the first 2 picks, but you only had 2 more picks. And then the last 2 selections of their 4-man class weren't all that crazy, at least in my opinion. Then we get to the overall offseason grade. I'll go B+, right? Solid free agency. Made the most of the draft, at least with those first 2 selections. And then the trade for Jalen Ramsey. Got to be the best move here. Because again, you're adding him into a Vic Fangio-esque defense, which Jalen Ramsey's coming over from Los Angeles where he played for Brandon Staley, plays a ton of quarters, and Raheem Morris, who inherited that Brandon Staley defense and kind of ran with it, running a lot of quarters. So he's going to be comfortable in that defense. They have flexibility to play him inside and out, and I just think that secondary is now loaded. Plus Javon Holland. I mean, I'd have a hard time thinking this defense doesn't lead the league in interceptions, which, man, plus that offense, this is going to be one of the best teams in football, potentially, if Tua Tagovailoa stays healthy. And if those 2 statements are true, this proves to be one of the best offenses in football, and this defense is just creating turnovers left, right, and center. Biggest question mark left, I'll just go offensive line overall, because, I liked the Isaiah Wynn, addition, late free agent signing. I think he can win that job from Liam Eichenberg, who's unfortunately kind of been disappointing so far in his career. Another question mark is going to be, can Teron Armstead stay healthy, right? Like, if he plays 17 games, then no question mark at left tackle. He's still one of the best players at that position, but he is a guy that you almost figure on missing at least 2 to 3 or 4 weeks in a year. But hopefully that's not the case this year. Hopefully he proves me wrong there. And then ultimately right tackle. So you could almost even just put right tackle here, just kind of do the same thing I did for the Bills. Can Austin Jackson take that step forward? We're going into year 4 of Austin Jackson, where it's year 3 of Spencer Brown. So I feel a little bit more certain that Austin Jackson ain't it versus Spencer Brown. But nevertheless, these guys can still prove me wrong. He was a younger player coming out of USC. And there's been some hype for him, but it's offseason season. Everyone's in the best shape of their career, and everyone looks great, and everyone's running the drills to perfection. Everyone's doing that right now. Can Austin Jackson really take a step forward where it matters most? We got to wait and see. If he does, this offensive line is going to be in a good spot. If he doesn't, there is a weak link, and there's going to be a point in which teams specifically target Austin Jackson with their best pass rusher and could cause some problems for this Miami offense. But we'll have to wait and see for that question and if it gets an answer. All right, moving on now to the New England Patriots. 8-9 last year, 3rd in the division. And I will say, this isn't going to be anywhere on here, but I think no team made a bigger leap in offensive coordinator from one who was there and to who's there now than the New England Patriots. Matt Patricia to Bill O'Brien, I think that is the single biggest leap from any team from a coordinator standpoint, at least on the offensive side of any team in the NFL. And honestly, I'd go as far as to say, I often say Minnesota made the biggest leap in defensive coordinator quality. I think I'd say New England had the biggest leap in coordinator quality. I think Brian Flores is a better DC than Bill O'Brien will be OC, but I just think Matt Patricia, I mean, he called an offensive game like a defensive coach. Wanted to run on early downs, get himself into manageable third and shorts, and run a screen, or something short underneath. And there was no creativity to it, minimal motion, not enough play action. It was kind of a lost year of development for Mac Jones. So all in all, just kind of an L there for Patricia. So just had to get that off my chest before we started to dive more into this. Free agency wasn't anything that really wowed me. I'll say best signing for Juju Smith-Schuster, but again, there wasn't anything that was super jumps off the page. Wow, what an amazing signing. That's going to change the complexion of this roster. No, a lot of it's just kind of bringing in New England guys, adding some depth to defense, re-signing Jonathan Jones, probably my honorable mention here. I think he's a good player, got him at a good price, which is always nice. I like when good players get paid, but it gets tricky from a team standpoint when good players get paid great money, right? So I think they paid Jonathan Jones a good player, good money, so that's always good. And I think the same can be said about Juju Smith-Schuster. Good player, made good money. So good on New England there, and they had to address wide receiver. So I think Juju, inside-out flexibility. We'll see what they end up wanting to do at slot. I could see a world where they ask Juju to play more on the outside like Kansas City did last year. Around 58% of his snaps last year were out wide versus previously doing a lot of that work on the inside. So I could see him being more of an outside wide receiver this year, and maybe they have a plan for who's going to step up in the slot, or Juju becomes that guy in the slot. But also, DeAndre Hopkins still out there, so we have a lot to kind of still figure out and see what could unfold there at wide receiver. The NFL draft, I'll give it a B. A lot of that is Christian Gonzalez, though. They added a ton of interior offensive line depth, which I did like on day 3. It makes me feel like maybe Michael Onwenu is going to move to tackle again. But we'll also see another honorable mention here for free agency, Riley Reif. I know he's not a great player, but 1 year, $5 million for a potential at least average starting tackle. That is an absolute surplus value type of move. Now, again, Riley Reif, not great, but if he's average, $5 million starting tackle, if he plays average, that is absolute surplus value. Anyways, getting back to the NFL draft, add a ton of interior guys. So you bring in Riley Reif, Michael Onwenu can play tackle. So, City So and, some of the other guys they brought on the interior, I think are, solid moves, and I can see, pathway to them becoming starters long term. But yeah, I got to go Christian Gonzalez for the best pick here. They trade down from 14 to 17 and still get, in my opinion, the highest upside corner of any of the guys in this year's NFL draft. I like Devin Witherspoon and his floor, but Christian Gonzalez is my number 1 corner because I thought he had the second best floor of any of the guys and the best ceiling. Insane athleticism, great fluid movement, can play man, can play zone, can play off, can play press. Got to see the ball skills take a step in the right direction last year at Oregon, post-Colorado. I just think this guy's trending in the right direction. We're seeing that learning curve starting to come into effect, and I think he's going to get that much better, specifically in New England, working with Bill Belichick and his son Steve Belichick, who's kind of the pseudo-DC. Yeah, I think this is going to be a great spot for him to go, and this is one of the best landing spots, I think, for him to realize his full potential, which makes that New England defense that much scarier to think about. Biggest question mark left has got to be wide receiver, because, I like the Juju shining, but he's not a superstar. Now, if they bring in DeAndre Hopkins, that's the guy who can step up. But, Devontae Parker, we know what he is. Contested catch guy. Juju Smith-Schuster, solid, but not going to be the ultimate difference maker, right? Tyquan Thornton has good speed. Maybe he gets a bigger role this year, but to me, he's kind of a one-note speed guy. So, who could step up? I feel like the question has got to be Kayshon Boutte. What is he going to be at the NFL level? Guy who 2 years ago at LSU looked like the first 6 games of the year was going to take the NFL by storm because he's 0 to 100 in the snap of a finger, insane top end speed, can do it yards after the catch, can win over the top, solid route runner, good hand, looked like a potential first rounder in the making. And then last year happened at LSU, and he looked very different and didn't get along with Brian Kelly. And then, had post a sub 30-inch vertical, and it's like, where'd all that explosiveness go? And then also ran the 4.5s. Where'd all the speed go? He's a bewildering prospect, but if there's a place for him to get back on track, it does feel like New England has the ability to do that. And if they can, man, this is going to look like one of the biggest steals in the NFL draft, taking him in the 6th round, and he's going to be the guy that New England steals from the rest of the league, and ultimately he becomes that number 1 wide receiver. So I felt like I had to ask him here, and I'm blocking a little bit, but you see the 2 question marks there, because I'm not saying it's going to happen, It's probably just going to be a rotation of solid guys, almost like a running back committee where it's like, yeah, this guy's good for that guy's good for this, and then all in all, it kind of gets the job done. I think that's what that wide receiver room is going to look like. But if there is a guy who could emerge currently on the roster as a superstar, kind of feel like that's Kayshon Boutte. So could he be the answer to the biggest question mark left in New England? We'll have to wait and see. Last team to talk about, the New York Jets. 7-10 last year, 4th division, which, when 7-10 gets you last place in the division, that's why you get all the hype about, the AFC East being the best division in football this year, especially when, go back a few months, I said the New York Jets, if they sign Jimmy Garoppolo, they can make the playoffs. They sign Derek Carr, they can win a playoff game. They sign Aaron Rodgers, they could win a Super Bowl. And they got the best. They got the biggest prize of that, bunch in Aaron Rodgers. So, yeah, of course, people are talking about the AFC East as the best division in the NFL, and I understand why. Free agency grade, I'll go B- again. This does not take into account the Aaron Rodgers trade, so don't murder me, Jets fans. But I'll say best signing, Allen Lazard. It's a little tough because, I don't know if there was any true free agency moves, because ultimately the biggest move they could make was getting Aaron Rodgers. So free agency wasn't anything too crazy. You bring back Connor McGovern. That's cool. That's solid. Not mad about that. But nonetheless, and actually now that I think about it, I corrected myself saying Connor Williams earlier. I did mean Connor McGovern with the Bills. I'm all over the place with these Connors that play on the interior offensive line right now. But Connor McGovern to play back, come back and play center if they need. Has played a little bit of guard in his career too. So if you get in a pinch, he could slide over to play some guard. And you bring in Randall Cobb, Allen Lazard, these Aaron Rodgers targets. But the reason I went with Lazard is because they signed him for a price point that I thought was kind of fair for a plus level blocker, solid big body slot guy. Has camaraderie with Rodgers, which goes a long way. And you could cut Corey Davis for basically the price tag you're paying Allen Lazard this year. And at this point in their careers, I don't see an argument to where it could be made Corey Davis is better than Allen Lazard. So if you can cut Corey Davis and basically bring in Allen Lazard for the same cap number, I can't see that as anything other than a win. So that's why I kind of had to go with the best signing as Allen Lazard, even though this wasn't really a free agency that really wowed me. But it was solid. Did enough, patched up holes, re-signed Quincy Williams, another move that could pay off. We'll talk about that later on. But yeah, solid offseason, or solid free agency in specific. NFL draft, I'll go with a B. Will McDonald's actually a pick I think made a lot of sense. It's actually a total Robert Saleh type of fit. And even, Douglas. Joe Douglas loves to attack the trenches. Like a lot of people talking about Howie Roseman and how he wants to attack the trenches. Douglas isn't too far off from that. Will McDonald just adding one more first rounder on top of Jermaine Johnson from the 2022 draft. And no question, no certainty that Carl Lawson is going to be the guy that lives up to that contract, and maybe he's the guy they move on from. And Don Franklin Myers can play inside and out, so I think he just gives you that much more flexibility. And I think Will McDonald's already going to be a better pro than he was playing on the inside of inside shoulder of tackles at Iowa State. So a better role is going to make him a better player. And especially if that role comes in a Robert Saleh defense. I think he's going to be a really, really good player. But Joe Tippmann, because they didn't get a tackle, and Tippmann could, to me, profiles as a guy who could play guard or center. So just like McGovern, where it's like, in a pinch, you could ask these guys to play guard, and then move Elijah Vera Tucker over to tackle, where he was okay, or more than okay. He was pretty solid last year when we got to see him at tackle. So I think he was the piece that gave them a little bit more flexibility on top of McGovern as well. So I like that pick probably the most of their 2023 draft class, just because they didn't get that tackle. Tippmann allows you to have that little bit more flexibility. And also, I think long-term, great fit for that blocking scheme, and could be that long-term starter at center. And there were some other picks down the rest of the way that were solid. All in all, I think it was a pretty good draft class. I give it a B for the Jets. And the offseason grade, got to give it an A. If they had an F draft and an F free agency, like literally if they did nothing in free agency and... Okay, let's change it a little bit. They did nothing in free agency and got an F for me, and then just had a middle-of-the-road, fine draft. It was okay, 7 picks. They just made their selections, and they got a C. Let's just say that world. They'd still get an A, because they addressed the most important position in the game, and they got the biggest upgrade that there was out there, and Aaron Rodgers. And now, I know a lot of people are saying, oh, Rodgers is washed, but I think he kind of was a victim of circumstance last year in Green Bay, and also just like not wanting to be there. I think now he's a little bit more motivated to kind of prove people wrong, and anytime there's a chip on the shoulder of Aaron Rodgers, you got to be a little bit worried about that if you're facing him, that is. And then, he's got a couple of wide receivers he's familiar with, but also he's got Garrett Wilson, who easily would have been wide receiver 1 last year in Green Bay. And also solid tight ends. The offensive line's figuring itself out, but could be a good unit. Really good running backs. An offensive coordinator he's worked with in the past. I think this is a situation that is a lot more favorable to him than what Green Bay was last year. So therefore, I think we're going to see Aaron Rodgers closer to what he was as a 2-time MVP winner, back-to-back MVP winner, 3 times overall, than what he was last year. I think that's going to be the Rodgers we see this year. So that's got to be the best move they made this offseason. And that by itself kind of puts the Jets in A territory to start. And as long as they didn't mess up the rest of their offseason, They're going to probably finish somewhere there about. Biggest question mark left, I'll go linebacker. It's tough. That is kind of an easy cop-out answer for me, it feels like, because, there's not a whole lot of high-end linebackers, it feels like, across the league, and it's also the position that gets attacked the most with the growth of RPOs and scrambling quarterbacks and, designed run games using QBs and, these Shanahan disciples, these McVay disciples, they attack linebackers really, really well. So all that kind of amounts to, that becomes kind of the position group that is the easiest to say it's the weak link. But I think that is true here for the Jets because CJ Mosley was a free agent signing that hasn't really worked out, but he's fine for what he is right now. As a thumper, eats up blocks, solid in the run game. If that's all you need CJ Mosley to be, he's overpaid for it, but he at least does that job okay. And then you get to Quincy Williams, who through the first 4 years hasn't been anything crazy, but a good athlete and obviously good, good signing on their part because now that makes Quincy Williams that much more likely to sign. So, they're playing the family dynamic, but Quincy Williams is a good athlete. And I just look at, how pivotal that linebacker position was in San Francisco for Robert Saleh. Obviously, it helps having a Fred Warner and a Dre Greenlaw in that building. But could Quincy Williams take any sort of a step in direction towards those guys? I'm not saying he's going to be Fred Warner and he needs to be Fred Warner this year. But could he go from this guy who's like a flashy athlete, but nothing more substantial there, to a guy's like, okay, he is actually a pretty good starter. He's an average starter at the worst. If Quincy Williams becomes an average linebacker in that defense where it's already great around him, that's a huge step in the right direction for the middle of the Jets defense, which feels like the one weak link where they could grow and get better. So Quincy Williams, I think, is the one guy who could step up and take this from, yeah, that's the one spot I definitely think they could do better, to a unit where it's like, it's the weakest link, but it's by no stretch an actual weak link. So Quincy Williams, can he take that step forward this year? But that is going to do it for my offseason grades for the AFC East. Tell me what you think about the Jets, the Patriots, the Bills, and the Dolphins down below in the comment section. What would you grade their free agency, their drafts, their trades? What was your favorite move from these 4 teams? Anything you have to share, I want to hear it down below in the comments section. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hit that like button if you did. And if you like this content, want to see more football videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. That's going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.